The first scream didn't come from a child. It came from the balloons exploding under a woman's stiletto heel, a brittle pop that sliced through the laughter and sent every head turning except the two little girls pressed against the glass wall as if trying to disappear into it. The Bennett Tech Family Day fundraiser was supposed to be a portrait of joy. An afternoon of polished executives in tailored suits performing warmth for donors. But the shock of that sudden sound only emphasized the strange stillness of the red-dressed twins who hadn't moved an inch. The atrium gleamed with the expensive shine only a tech giant in downtown Chicago could afford. Towers of balloons, bright booths for face-painting a miniature petting zoo fenced in near the corner, a photo backdrop that displayed Bennett Tech's silver logo. Everything was engineered to scream success. Parents snapped pictures of their children waving balloon swords. Partners of executives congratulated each other on how well the event was going. Yet, in the far left corner, Lily Bennett and her sister Grace sat curled up like two abandoned dolls no one had noticed had fallen off the shelf. Their hair copper bright and long enough to touch the red fabric of their dresses, framed identical faces, carrying an expression children their age shouldn't know, quiet resignation. Daniel Reed felt the weight of the moment before he even understood it. He was pushing a cleaning cart past the snack station, just another janitor's sweat drying in the creases of his uniform after a construction shift earlier that morning. 36 years old, but moving like a man in his 60s, he kept his eyes down as usual. That was how people liked him, silent, invisible, useful. But the sound of those balloons bursting made him lift his gaze, and that was when he saw the twins. Something inside him stilled, then twisted, then pulled with a force he didn't have the strength to fight. He slowed the cart. He stared. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt a ghost stirring. At first, he didn't understand what he was seeing. Children avoiding other children. That happened. Shy kids, maybe. But then he noticed the way Lily's hand rose to tuck her hair behind her ear and revealed the tiny glint of a hearing aid. Grace had one too. The understanding hit him like a sudden punch to the lungs. Deaf. Both of them. Two untouched islands in a sea of noise. He should have kept moving. No one expected a janitor to involve himself. Especially not one who carried a secret he had buried under layers of exhaustion. He had once been an ASL teacher, a fluent signer, a man whose hands had danced when telling stories. But that was before Emma died. Before her absence hollowed him out. Before he locked away every memory of her hands, shaping love out of silence. He forced himself to step back, gripping the handle of his cart so tightly his knuckles went pale. Not again. He couldn't open that door. Not here. Not now. But then Lily lifted her face and stared at him, not questioning, not pleading, but with the soft, bone-deep acceptance of a child who had already learned she was forgettable. That expression gutted him. It was the same look he had seen on his son Noah after Emma's heart had stopped without warning one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. It was the look of a child who'd been taught by the world to make herself small. A balloon animal vendor laughed loudly behind him, dragging the attention of the crowd back toward the center of the atrium. But Daniel no longer heard any of it. All he heard was Emma's voice, in memory silent but unmistakable, asking a question he had avoided for too long. If you see a child drowning in the same loneliness you once carried, how can you walk away? He abandoned the cart. His feet moved before he decided anything. Executives paused confused, watching a janitor cross the room as if he had every right to move through their carefully orchestrated event. But Daniel kept walking. Something about the moment felt inevitable, like a fuse had been lit the second those balloons burst. He knelt beside the girls, ignoring the flare of pain in his lower back. Both children startled, their eyes going wide, not with fear, but with disbelief that an adult had approached them at all. Daniel opened his hands, slowly feeling the stiffness of muscles that had not shaped a single sign in years. But the moment he lifted them into position, muscle memory surged like a forgotten language waking. He signed one word, hello. The effect was instantaneous. Lily's eyes widened with something close to shock. Grace's lips parted soundlessly. They looked at each other, then back at him, as if trying to confirm that this small miracle was real. Daniel felt a tremor ripple through his chest, a crack in a wall he had sworn would never break again. The twins weren't invisible anymore. They had been seen by him, and the truth he had spent years denying rose with quiet, undeniable power. He was not just a janitor. He was a man who once built bridges in silence, a man with a forgotten gift, a man whose hands still carried the ability to change a child's world. And something told him that the moment he signed that single word, everything in all their lives had just shifted. The moment Daniel's hands lifted into the light, a tremor of memory surged beneath his skin, as if some long dormant part of him had woken without permission. He hadn't meant to kneel. He hadn't meant to speak in the language he had sworn never to use again. But Lily and Grace stared at him with an aching mix of disbelief and fragile hope, and the dam inside him cracked wider than he expected. He signed slowly, the movements rigid at first, rusty from disuse. My name is Daniel. What are yours for a heartbeat? The twins didn't move. Then Lily lifted her small hands and shaped her name with tenderness, as if afraid the world might steal the moment away. Grace followed, more cautious, but the truth shimmered clearly in both girls' eyes. They were shocked. Someone finally spoke in the language of their silence. Daniel felt something pinch behind his ribs, a sensation both painful and familiar. Emma had once said that sign language wasn't just communication. It was connection carved out of air, emotion made visible. He had forgotten the beauty of it. Or rather, he had forced himself to forget. After her heart betrayed her 3 years earlier, he had boxed every memory, every sign, every private joke they had carved with their hands, and he buried them beneath endless work shifts and sleepless nights. But now, staring at Lily and Grace, he realized the burial had never been complete. Grace signed again, her movements, small, but devastatingly calm. Nobody talks to us. Not ever. The simplicity of it hit Daniel harder than the news of his wife's death had hit him, both cruel truths delivered without warning, without mercy. A burst balloon popped somewhere behind them. Children shrieked with delight, and Daniel wondered how 2 little girls could remain so still in a world that moved so loudly around them. He forced his hands to move. Well, I'm talking to you. He signed and felt another fracture open inside him. Something warm, something dangerous, something like the beginnings of hope. You want to know why elephants never forget? The twins blinked, unsure where this was going, and Daniel allowed a faint smile to ghost across his mouth. Because no one ever tells them anything worth forgetting. It was a terrible joke. The kind he used to tell new ASL students on their first day, the kind Emma always groaned at before laughing anyway. And just like that, Lily's lips curved. Grace's shoulders shook. Silent laughter flickered across their faces, fragile at first, then brighter, as if joy had been waiting inside them with nowhere to go. Daniel felt the shift around them before he saw it. Parents were slowing mid-stride. Executives stared with narrowed eyes, trying to reconcile the janitor they ignored 30 seconds ago with the man who now held the focus of 2 children, and somehow the room. But the real shift happened inside Daniel. His hands no longer felt like dead weight. They felt alive. He kept going, ridiculous shoulder dances, penguin impressions, a story about trying to teach a dog sign language. Each movement loosened something in him. Each smile from the twins stitched a tiny seam in a wound he thought would never close. For the first time since Emma died, Daniel remembered what it felt like to be whole, and he understood with startling clarity that one small act, a single hello, had set in motion a change he could no longer stop, no matter how terrified he was of where it might lead. The laughter reached Laura Bennett before she even saw her daughters. Real laughter, the kind that used to fill her home with a warmth she hadn't felt since her husband died. For a moment she thought she imagined it, another cruel trick her exhausted mind liked to play. Then she heard it again, lighter, sharper, unmistakably, Lily and Grace. It froze her mid-sentence, the investor's voice dissolving into meaningless noise as her head jerked toward the sound. Across the atrium, beneath the glass ceiling glowing with late afternoon sun, the two little girls she had spent 18 months failing to reach were doubled over shoulders, trembling in silent joy. And kneeling beside them was someone she had barely noticed before, the janitor. He moved his hands fluidly, gracefully, telling a story with gestures that lit up her children's faces like lanterns. For a dizzying second, Laura couldn't breathe. The investor said something about projected earnings. She didn't respond. Another question followed. She didn't hear it. Her mind was anchored to the impossible scene unfolding across the room. Lily and Grace, her daughters, who barely smiled anymore, were laughing with a man she had never spoken more than 2 words to. A janitor with tired eyes and a uniform that didn't quite fit. A man the executive stepped around as if he were furniture. Her daughters looked at him as if he were sunlight. Laura excused herself abruptly, ignoring the investor's startled blink. Her heels struck sharply against the marble floor as she crossed the atrium, each step tightening the knot in her chest. Guilt pulsed with every stride. For all her power, for all her determination, she hadn't been able to reach her own children in the way this stranger had done in minutes. A flash of memory cut through her Michael behind the wheel, smiling at her in the rearview mirror as Lily and Grace chattered in the back seat. Then the phone call. The hospital. The doctor's eyes gentle, apologetic. The girls surviving. Michael not. And then the discovery that the crash had damaged their hearing so severely they would never experience the world the same way again. 18 months of therapy sessions, specialist appointments, nights, she fell asleep at her desk, trying to design a future sturdy enough for 3 broken hearts. She tried tutors, immersive classes, voice lessons. Nothing worked. The girls retreated further, slipping quietly into a world she couldn't seem to enter. And now a janitor, someone everyone else overlooked, was sitting on the floor with them, breaking through walls she had not even managed to dent. She reached them just as the laughter softened. Lily noticed her first, her posture snapping straight. Grace followed the light in her eyes, dimming. That small shift, the way joy drained from their faces, the instant they saw her, cut sharper than any criticism she had ever endured. "You know sign language," she said to Daniel, though it was not really a question. His answer was polite, humble, deliberately small. He didn't mention that his hands moved like someone who had once taught the language professionally. He didn't mention the kind of loss that carved that gentleness into a man. But Laura sensed it. Her instincts had been honed through boardrooms and battles far fiercer than this atrium. This man was hiding a story, one deeper than he allowed anyone to see. She glanced at her daughters again. Their eyes were pleading, fragile, hopeful. And she knew instantly that whatever Daniel Reed truly was, whatever he once had been, he had done something extraordinary today. He had reached the girls she loved more than anything in the world. And she needed to know how. The fundraiser ended in a blur of applause, music fading, volunteers folding tables, while the last of the families drifted out into the cooling Chicago evening. Daniel stayed behind, pushing his cart toward the supply closet, hoping the weight in his chest would settle once he returned to the shadows where he belonged. But when he reached the doorway, Laura Bennett was already standing there, the polished authority of a chief executive stripped from her face, leaving only a mother who looked as if she had forgotten how to breathe. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice thin but steady enough to reveal she had rehearsed this moment. Daniel nodded, guiding her to a quiet corner of the employee break room. The air smelled faintly of coffee and lemon disinfectant. The door clicked shut, slicing away the noise of cleanup outside. Suddenly, the silence felt too heavy, too intimate, as if both of them had been disarmed by it. Laura sat across from him, hands twisting together in a way no board member had ever seen. "My name is Laura Bennett," she began, though he obviously knew. "Those girls, Lily and Grace, they're my daughters." Her voice trembled on the last word. Daniel waited, sensing she needed space to unravel something tightly knotted. She inhaled shakily. 18 months ago, my husband was driving them home from a birthday party. A tire blew out. He didn't make it. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue, and Daniel felt the air shift, as though her grief had gravity. The impact damaged their hearing, almost completely. They can still speak, but it hurts them. Speaking reminds them of what their lives used to sound like. So now they mostly sign, or stay silent. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears that betrayed the image she fought so hard to maintain. "I've tried everything. Tutors, therapists, immersive programs. Still, I couldn't get them to open up. And today, in minutes, you..." Her voice cracked. "How did you do that?" Daniel stared at his calloused hands, hands that had once been instruments of joy and language. "My wife Emma was deaf," he said quietly. "We spoke entirely in sign." He hesitated, as if stepping onto a frozen lake that might give way beneath him. "She died 3 years ago. Heart failure. I came home and found paramedics in the kitchen. Noah, my son, was screaming, and I knew before they told me." His breath faltered. "I used to teach ASL. But after Emma died, every sign felt like reopening the wound. So I quit. I buried that part of my life and took whatever jobs kept me too tired to think." Laura's expression softened her own pain, folding into his. "But you stopped running today," she whispered. It wasn't an accusation, it was recognition. Daniel thought of Lily's silent laughter, of Grace's cautious smile. Maybe he murmured. Then Laura leaned forward, desperation breaking through her composure. "I want you to teach me. Teach me how to talk to my daughters the way you did today. I'll pay whatever you ask." Daniel opened his mouth to refuse automatically, but something stopped him, the memory of his hands moving without pain, and the light returning to 2 little girls' faces, the echo of Emma's warmth instead of the sting of her absence. Slowly he exhaled. "I don't want your money, but I'll teach you. 2 hours every evening before my shift, on one condition." Laura held her breath. "Bring Lily and Grace, every time." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "We'll be there." The night swallowed the city by the time Daniel reached his small apartment on the south side, exhaustion pressing on him like wet cement. He unlocked the door quietly, expecting darkness, but found his 10-year-old son Noah asleep on the couch, a book rising and falling gently on his chest. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, must have checked on him again. Daniel felt a pinch of gratitude, then guilt, always guilt. He knelt beside the couch and touched Noah's shoulder. The boy blinked awake, hair sticking up, eyes cloudy with sleep and worry. "Dad," he whispered, "you look tired." Daniel hesitated. Words felt too fragile for what he needed to say. So for the first time in 3 long years, he let his hands rise into the dim light. I met 2 little girls today. He signed slowly, uncertainly, as though speaking a language with scarred vocal cords. They reminded me of your mom. They reminded me that she wouldn't want me to hide anymore. I'm going to start teaching sign again. For a moment, Noah didn't move. Then his face crumpled, tears spilling as he answered in halting signs he hadn't used since Emma died. Mom would be happy. Daniel pulled him close, both of them shaking under the weight of remembered love and forgotten words. For the first time in years, their grief felt shared instead of isolating. The next evening, promptly at 8, Laura arrived at Bennett Tech's 10th floor conference room with Lily and Grace in tow. The girls rushed forward when they saw Daniel, their eyes bright in a way that made something inside him loosen. Laura lingered near the door, suddenly unsure. Her sleek blazer and impeccable posture looked out of place in the quiet room. Daniel sensed her nerves, the fear of failing again in front of her daughters. The first lesson was awkward from the start. Daniel demonstrated basic structure and hand shapes, but Laura's movements were stiff, uncertain. She mixed up similar signs, forgot positions, and turned her wrists at odd angles. Each mistake visibly tightened her shoulders. Lily and Grace watched their mother with wide-eyed caution, as if the slightest disappointment from her might send everything spiraling back into silence. But then something shifted. Laura tried again, and again. When she signed a simple sentence, "My name is Laura," correctly, for the first time, she let out a shaky laugh, startled by her own progress. The twins exchanged a glance loaded with surprise, even a flicker of pride. They had never seen their mother try like this. Night after night, she returned. Some evenings she arrived directly from high-stakes meetings, still wearing a power suit sharp enough to cut glass. Other times she showed up in soft sweaters, her hair undone, looking almost like someone who had remembered she was human. Each lesson cracked her polished facade a little more. She fumbled. She laughed at herself. She apologized to her daughters when she signed something wrong. And slowly, Lily and Grace moved closer, leaning into her attempts, their trust rebuilding millimeter by fragile millimeter. Sometimes Daniel caught them watching him, not with the awe from the fundraiser, but with quiet curiosity, as though sensing that he too was learning how to live again. He noticed the echo of Emma in every gesture he made. But instead of pain, there was something gentler now, a warmth blooming where the wound had finally stopped bleeding. By the end of the week, the conference room no longer felt like a classroom. It felt like the beginning of a world stitched back together by 3 pairs of small hands and 2 adults finally brave enough to stop running. 4 weeks into the lessons, the fragile rhythm Daniel had built began to wobble the moment Mrs. Chen called with bad news. She had slipped on her kitchen floor and sprained her ankle, her voice thin with embarrassment, as she explained she wouldn't be able to check on Noah for several days. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He couldn't miss work, and he couldn't cancel the lessons. Laura and the girls were making real progress, the kind that vanished easily, if not nurtured. Panic scraped through him as he pictured Noah alone in their apartment, drifting back into silence. When he explained the situation to Laura that evening, she didn't hesitate. "Bring him," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Lily and Grace have been asking about him anyway." Daniel froze, thrown by the unexpected invitation. Noah had barely interacted with other children since Emma died. A classroom of noisy kids overwhelmed him. What would he do with 2 strangers who communicated in a language he hadn't used openly in years? But Laura's expression held no doubt, only an open door. Slowly, he nodded. Noah clung to the straps of his backpack as they entered Bennett Tech's gleaming lobby the next night, eyes widening as if he had stepped into a cathedral of glass and light. "Dad," he whispered, "this place looks like it costs $1 million. Daniel chuckled nervously, though his heart hammered like a warning drum. What if this was a mistake? What if Noah shut down? What if Lily and Grace pulled away again? But the moment they walked into the conference room, everything changed. The twins were already practicing fingerspelling, their red curls bouncing as they concentrated. When they noticed the boy standing beside Daniel, both girls froze their eyes, widening with a mix of surprise and unmistakable excitement. Daniel signed introductions, nudging Noah gently toward them. Noah hesitated only a breath before lifting his hands. "Hello, my name is Noah. Nice to meet you." His signs were rusty, uneven, but unmistakably earnest. Lily's face lit up. Grace nearly jumped. "You know sign language," she signed rapidly, hands trembling with eagerness. "My mom taught me," Noah answered, and Daniel saw the shimmer in his son's eyes the moment he added, "She was deaf like you." Silence settled, but not the heavy kind, rather a delicate, reverent stillness shared by children who had each lost something irreplaceable. Then Grace stepped forward, solemn in her bravery. "Our dad died too, in a car accident." Lily followed her voice soft inside her hands. "We miss him every day." Noah nodded, eyes glistening. "My mom's heart stopped. I still talk to her at night. Dad says she can hear me somehow." Lily exchanged a glance with her sister, then signed with gentle certainty, "We talk to our dad too. Maybe our parents are friends up there." The heaviness cracked, replaced by a spark of childhood resilience. "Do you want to see our handstands?" Lily signed suddenly. "We practiced." Noah's face broke into a grin. "I can do handstands too." And just like that, the room transformed into a playground. 3 children flipped, stumbled, laughed, Lily's silent giggles, Grace's bright grin, Noah's breathless laughter blending into one improbable harmony. Daniel and Laura stood back, their eyes damp, watching something remarkable unfold. These children, each carrying invisible fractures, were stitching themselves together in real time. And in the glow of their clumsy cartwheels and triumphant cheers, Daniel realized the truth with a force that nearly buckled him. The lesson tonight had nothing to do with sign language. It was about healing 3 small hearts, discovering they didn't have to do it alone anymore. After that night, nothing returned to the way it had been. The lessons blurred into something warmer, something that resembled family more than instruction. Noah joined every session, slipping naturally into the space beside Lily and Grace, as if the 3 of them had been carved from the same missing piece. Their hands flew with growing confidence, their laughter stitched itself into the air, and the 10th floor conference room began to feel less like a corporate meeting space and more like a shelter built out of second chances. Laura started bringing dinner, usually pizza or sandwiches from a deli she claimed made the best soups in Chicago. The children ate first trading stories in flickering signs and excited gestures, leaving crumbs scattered like confetti across the table. Daniel and Laura watched from opposite ends of the room, and their conversations slowly drifting away from techniques and vocabulary. What began as discussions about hand-shape accuracy became reflections on work, on childhood, on the strange survival instinct that awakens after losing someone you love. Daniel noticed that Laura laughed more easily now. Not the sharp, polished laugh she used in boardrooms, but something softer, as if she were remembering how. Still, exhaustion nipped at Daniel's heels. He had begun turning down construction shifts so he could give Noah the father he deserved, but the financial strain returned with teeth. He hid it well, at least he thought he did, until one evening when he arrived 10 minutes late, shadows under his eyes, shoulders heavy with a tiredness that looked older than him. Laura studied him across the room, her expression shifting subtly, as if piecing together a puzzle no one else had noticed existed. The next day, she asked him to stop by her office before the lesson. He entered cautiously, unused to stepping into spaces where decisions worth millions were made. Her office was sleek, nearly sterile, except for a framed photo of Lily and Grace from before the accident. In that picture, the girls were laughing a sound he had not yet heard, but had begun imagining. Laura gestured for him to sit, though he remained standing wary. "I know you've been working 2 jobs," she began. "And I know you've been giving up the one that pays more so you can be here for your son and for my daughters." She paused, choosing her words carefully, the way someone approaches a wild animal that might bolt at any moment. Bennett Tech is launching a new accessibility initiative. We need someone to develop ASL training programs, consult with HR, help us build a more inclusive environment. A permanent role, full-time, salary, benefits, predictable hours. She held his gaze. "I want you to lead it." Daniel felt the ground tilt. "Laura, I'm not qualified. You're not just anything she cut in quietly. You're the reason my daughters laugh again." Silence swelled between them, thick with possibility and fear. Accepting meant stepping back into the world he abandoned when Emma died. It meant choosing life over numbness. Slowly, painfully, he realized he wanted that. Not just for himself, but for Noah, for the girls, even for Laura, who looked at him with a trust he had not earned, but somehow held. He accepted. From there, something shifted between them, not romance exactly, but the early tremors of it. A lingering glance when their hands brushed while reaching for the same folder. Conversations that lingered after the children ran ahead. Moments of quiet understanding, fragile but real. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Healing like sign language was something learned, gesture by gesture, breath by breath, until one day it felt natural again. 2 years after the fundraiser that changed everything, Daniel stood in the backyard of Laura's home, tugging nervously at the cuffs of a suit that actually fit him for once. Twinkling lights zigzagged overhead, casting warm pools of gold across the lawn where chairs had been arranged in careful rows. Guests murmured softly, the kind of hushed anticipation reserved for moments when lives shift in ways that cannot be undone. Beside him, Noah, 12, now taller, steadier, straightened his father's tie with the calm competence of someone who had grown into hope instead of shrinking from it. "You nervous, Dad?" Noah signed with a crooked smile. Terrified, Daniel answered, though the admission made him exhale something close to laughter. Terrified, but good. The boy nodded as if this was exactly how a man should feel moments before promising his life to someone who had already saved parts of him he thought were lost forever. Music drifted into the warm evening air. At the other end of the aisle, Lily and Grace appeared in matching dresses, the soft color of spring blossoms, bouquets, clutched in small but steady hands. Their faces glowed with an excitement that bordered on pride. They had insisted on being part of the ceremony not as flower girls, but as witnesses, silent storytellers of the journey that had brought them all here. They took their places across from Noah, their fingers brushing his in a quick hello before they composed themselves again. Then Laura stepped forward. The yard seemed to still around her. She wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, but on her it looked like peace, finally choosing a place to rest. Her hair caught the last streaks of sunlight, and her smile, soft, certain, was one Daniel had once believed he would never see again on anyone he loved. She walked slowly, not for dramatic effect, but because every step toward him meant walking out of a past, filled with grief, and into a future neither of them had thought they deserved. The ceremony was brief, but Daniel barely heard a word spoken by the officiant. His focus was on Laura's hands as she lifted them, signing her vows, even as she spoke them aloud. You taught me that showing up is an act of courage, that learning someone's language is an act of love. You returned my daughters to me. You gave us all permission to feel again. Tears burned Daniel's eyes, blurring her figure until she looked like a memory made real. When it was his turn, his hands trembled but didn't falter. You taught me that running from pain only makes you miss the good. You gave Noah his smile back. You gave me a reason to stop surviving and start living. His voice cracked, but his signs remained steady, glowing in the golden light, like a promise made twice. When the officiant pronounced them, married, 3 small figures rose beside them. Noah, Lily, and Grace signed in perfect unison, "I love you." Later, as dusk deepened and the children chased each other across the yard, Daniel felt Laura's hand slip into his. Broken pieces he thought could build something stronger, not by forgetting the past, but by honoring it. And when a soft breeze brushed his cheek, he imagined Emma and Michael somewhere beyond sight, watching proud of the family rising from the rubble of loss into the quiet brilliance of a second chance. In the end, Daniel and Laura's journey reminds us of a truth well known among trauma specialists and family counselors: healing rarely happens in isolation. It unfolds in connection and shared language, and in the quiet courage to be seen again. After loss has taught you to disappear, their story demonstrates how the smallest gestures, a greeting, a lesson, a hand extended toward another, can redirect the emotional trajectory of an entire family. When people choose to show up for one another, even imperfectly, hope becomes not an idea, but a lived reality. If this story moved, you consider liking and subscribing to support more narratives that illuminate the strength inside everyday lives. Your engagement helps these stories reach those who may need them most. And before you go, share a quick comment below, just 3 simple words that capture the heart of this journey. Choose connection.